All the variant readings in the New Testament, there's one that's my favorite, hands down, my all-time favorite variant reading. It appears in Jude 1:5. Within the manuscripts that contain Jude 1:5, you have a few different variant readings, including God delivered the people out of Egypt. Then you have the Lord delivered the people out of Egypt, which is supported by better witnesses, actually. But also there's a more probable reading, at least according to the most recent edition of the critical text of the New Testament. And the reading is simply this, and I like it. Jesus delivered the people out of Egypt. Jesus delivered the people out of Egypt. This is also contained in a few translations, like the most recent ESV, but also that's consistent with Paul's teaching in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 4. So what you have two biblical authors, the Apostle Paul and Jude, that identify Jesus as the Yahweh that delivered the people out of Egypt. It's beautiful. But my favorite variant, it's not that one. My favorite variant, although unlike that one, it's not a viable variant. My favorite variant reading, it's not a viable variant, but it's fantastic. And it reads like this. Oh, also, interestingly, this variant reading that I'm about to quote, it appears in the earliest manuscript of Jude, P72. And it reads like this. Theos Christos, the God Christ, delivered the people out of Egypt. It refers to Jesus as the God Christ. Does it get better than that? The deity of Christ is a consistent teaching. It's a constant and consistent teaching from Genesis to Revelation. In Genesis, in his pre-incarnate appearances as the angel of the Lord, he was identified as Yahweh. And then in the New Testament, he's identified as Yahweh, as God and truly man. Normally, when I teach on the deity of Christ, I present three verifiable proofs that plainly show that Jesus Christ was truly God, not in mere representation, and certainly not in a polytheistic way, but in the context of monotheistic Trinitarianism. Truly God in an ontological sense. The three verifiable proofs that I see that plainly show this is, number one, Jesus Christ in the Old and New Testament is presented as God. He's presented as Yahweh. He's called God. He's called Yahweh in an ontological sense. Number two, he's presented as the agent of creation, the creator himself, not as a mere helper, but as the unchangeable creator of all things. And number three, he was worshiped in a religious context. That means he was worshiped as God. The last presentation that I made, it dealt with that subject, where Jesus Christ was worshiped as God by men, by his apostles, and in Hebrews 1:6, by all the angels of God. The Father commanded all the angels, which excludes Jesus from being an angel, because he says to all the angels, worship the Son. He commands them in a very urgent way, aorist imperative, worship the Son. You have those three verifiable proofs. What I want to do in a multi-video presentation is examine the places where Jesus made specific claims of himself, affirming his essential deity in an ontological sense. This also is a response to some of the main objections against the deity of Christ. Muslims always ask the question in objection, where did Jesus ever say, I am God? That's one of their main objections. Sometimes they'll attach, where was he, or where did he say, worship me? We already dealt with that in the last presentation. Yeah, He was worshiped as God by men, apostles, and the angels. But the first objection, where did Jesus ever say, I am God? When I teach on the deity of Christ in classes, sometimes that's the first question I ask, and I always get answers, the same answers. John 8:58, he's the I am, he's the Alpha and Omega, first and last, which are titles of deity. However, that wasn't the question. That wasn't the answer to the question. The question was, where did he ever say, I am God? Just like that. Literally, I am God. Well, why would he? That's my response to Muslims. Why would he? Claiming that you're God is to say I am God, literally that statement, it's very ambiguous and unclear. Why? Because in the Old Testament, the term for Elohim, translated God, had a wide range of meaning depending on the context. In other words, if you look at the Old Testament, judges were called Elohim, Exodus 21:6 and 22:8-9. Angels were called Elohim, Psalm 8:5. False gods were called Elohim, Psalm 96, verse 5. 96:5 sounds like a radio station. 96:5. And the true God was called Elohim all over the place, Jeremiah 10:10. Also in Exodus 7:1, Yahweh said to Moses, see, I will make you as Elohim to Pharaoh. Now, certainly not deity, but rather as a direct representative of God. So here's the point. In the Old Testament, Moses, judges, angels, mighty men, they're all called Elohim. So if Jesus were to say, if he said literally, I am God, so what? Maybe he was claiming he was Michael the archangel. Maybe he was claiming he was a really good judge because they were called God or gods. Maybe he was just claiming he was a mighty man, super strong. It would have been so ambiguous. But Jesus made claims, his claims, which we will look at. This is part one. We will look at in subsequent video presentations. Jesus made claims to be God ontologically that were much stronger. His claims were much stronger and unequivocal than if he had literally said, I am God. So unambiguous were his claims to deity that they were clearly understood by the Jews because they wanted to kill him. They were understood by his friends. They worshiped him as God. They clearly saw his claims as claims to be ontologically equal with God, God himself. To clearly express that he was God in this way, Jesus used, and we will look at this, words, he used titles and phrases of himself that were specifically and exclusively used by Yahweh, nobody else. The titles, words, and phrases that Jesus used were never applied to humans or angels or mighty men as Elohim was, as we'll see. Also note, as we'll see, and this is devastating to one is Pentecostalism. Within these claims, these actually in proximity of the most significant claims of Christ, of the Son to be God, Jesus distinguishes himself from the Father in the same breath, which is consistent with the doctrine of the Trinity, not consistent with oneness Unitarianism or any form of Unitarianism. So this is part one, and we will look at subsequent video presentations, and we will examine specific claims that Jesus made to be ontologically God, that he made that denoted his essence as God ontologically. So I'm going to share this. I'll show you what we will be dealing with. The claims of Christ as God. I have my pointer here. We'll explore some of the most significant claims, some significant claims of ontological coequality, coeternality, and co-distinction with God that were made by Christ by his identification as Yahweh, as the angel of the Lord, his pre-incarnate appearances as the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, and two, his claims to be truly God in the New Testament, including his claims to be, we will look at all these in subsequent videos, the agent of his own resurrection. That didn't make him God, that proved he was God. He resurrected himself after he died. We will look at the unpredicated I am statements and other divine titles, which resulted in the Jews wanting to kill him. They understood what he was claiming. We will look at his claims to be the unique divine Son of God, equal with the Father, which again resulted in the Jews wanting to kill him. These claims were resulted in the Jews understanding clearly what he meant, and we will look at his claims to be the divine Son of Man, resulting again in the Jews wanting to kill him. And then finally, we will look at the definitive claims he made to have eternally pre-existed. Because there are Unitarians like Jehovah's Witnesses that have no problem that he existed before Bethlehem as Michael the Archangel, but he still was created. So we will look at these points in subsequent videos, which show Jesus plainly identified himself to be equal with God. So stay tuned for those presentations and subscribe to this channel so you will get notifications when these parts come out, when these subsequent videos come out, dealing with the points I addressed. And don't forget to visit the website, christiandefense.org. So stay tuned for subsequent videos regarding these in very important teachings, because it's important to the way we evangelize. We should include the deity of Christ, because Christ said in John 8:24, unless you believe that I am the eternal God, you will perish in your sins. See why this is important to us, to our personal faith, and important to our evangelism. We need to include it. We need to have a complete presentation of the gospel, which includes things like the incarnation, which includes the deity of Christ, justification through faith alone. So stay tuned as we go through some of these claims of Christ to be ontologically God. He was God in the flesh, the two-natured person. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.